because usually people who want to get more involved politically or socially in the trade union movement always say, I haven't got enough time. It's never, I haven't got the money, I can't afford to. It's always, I don't have enough time. And a lot of times people don't realise that they are entitled to time off for certain things, political things, trade union things. So I put together a quick presentation to be able to talk to people about how they take time off, what things there is to take time off for. So there's different types of leave, depending on what industry you're in as to what there is. The most common ones are your annual leave. Floating leave is for people who can pick and choose their holidays. I can't pick and choose my holidays. I get rostered my leave and then I have to try and swap. I get a few days ad hoc if I'm lucky. That's what we call floating leave. Bank holidays, sick leave, sabbaticals, which are long-term paid, long-term unpaid time off work if you wanted to go and study or go abroad, do some charity work. Gardening leave, people often hear about and don't know what it is. If you leave a company, you're not necessarily needed to see out your notice, but you can't go and work for anyone else until your notice period is over. So you're at home paid to do nothing, and it's called gardening leave. Unpaid leave is obviously unpaid leave. And holiday of a lifetime is something that a lot of companies do and people don't realise they can do. You can take a lot of companies allow you to take all your annual leave in one go well, it's meant to be holiday of a lifetime, so every once in a while. So if you wanted to go on a longer trip, we've had people disappear off to India for a couple of months. They put all their leave together, all their days off together, and they just disappear off. Someone else I worked with decided they wanted to go to South America, put all their leave together. It just unfortunately leaves you with not enough at the end of the year if you wanted to do other things, but a lot of companies do pop that. Other types of leave. Oh, was that a question or is it just no?
I think Adrian's having trouble.
So there's bereavement leave for funerals, medical leave. Obviously, you're entitled to have time off if you need to have hospital appointments. It's often unpaid, but there are exceptions for maternity, and if some people have caring responsibilities, they are entitled to some paid leave and some unpaid leave to help people. There's this thing called direct discrimination by association. So I've represented a lot of people who've wanted time off to care for people if they've had children or elderly parents that have had something that's classed as a disability, and the company have refused the person time off to care for this person, to take them to a hospital appointment or care for them after an operation or general day-to-day care. The company that you work for as an individual can be seen to be discriminating against that person because you are their primary carer. Therefore, if they're a disabled person who needs your care to help them go about their day-to-day life, by your company that you work for not granting you time off as an able-bodied person to help a disabled person, they are directly discriminating against the disabled person, and that's called direct discrimination by association. There have been lots of employment tribunals where people have taken their employers to court for not helping support them where they've got disabled carer responsibilities. We don't have any case law at the moment for children, and it happens quite a lot where people with disabled children with cancer have asked for time off and companies haven't granted it. It's not got as far as employment tribunal because the companies suddenly don't want to be accused of being companies that are stopping disabled children having the support that they need. So things are usually put in place then. There is a new law called carers leave, which I'll talk about I think on the next slide. If you wanted to be a health and safety rep, you are legally entitled to time off to attend the courses. Paid time off as well. So for most industries, that's 10 days plus paid release for health and safety duties whenever you need to do that. ULR, which is Union Learning Rep. A lot of industries and organisations have Union Learning Reps in place as well. Again, most of those positions come with paid leave for courses and paid release. A school governor leave, what a lot of people don't realise, if you're a school governor, you're entitled to paid or unpaid depending on the company, but you are entitled to leave as a school governor. And the company that I work for and a lot of railway companies will grant you 5 days most of them will grant you 5 days paid per year if you are a school governor. A lot of parents don't realise this, and being a shift worker, and it's notoriously difficult to get flexible working on the railway, where people say, I wish I could have spent more time with my children, a lot of them would be prepared to become school governors, but they're not aware that that opportunity exists. So for people who are parents of young children, make them aware to look at being a school governor, and they could get extra time off to spend at the school, spend with their children, influencing their the lives of the children at local schools. Some companies offer first aid leave. I get a day a year extra holiday for being a first aider, so I definitely make sure I keep that up, because I don't use the day to do course refreshers. That's my day as far as I'm concerned, and I refresh things in my own time. Casual leave and release for reps duties are things where, as a rep, if I suddenly have to come in on my day off to represent someone, I get the day back as casual leave later on in the year. Maternity leave, it is up to a year off. With most companies, not the full year is paid. The only obligation you have after you give birth is you must take 2 weeks off. So some people dash back straight away, some people stay off longer. Not everyone realizes how long you can take off. What people don't always realize is if you have a stillbirth after 24 weeks, you are still entitled to the full year's maternity leave if you feel that you want to take it. There's new I think there's new laws being passed around bereavement leave for carers, for parents of young children, but there's a bit of muddy water where people don't realise that they would still be entitled to the full maternity leave after a stillbirth, and that's longer time off if needed than the proposed new bereavement leave rules. You're also entitled to paid leave for antenatal appointments. A lot of companies are useless, really. They'll try and get people to swap antenatal appointments to their days off, or they'll try and swap their working days so they haven't got to pay them for the time off. However, if you are pregnant and you have a reasonable maternity appointment, a scan, antenatal, you are entitled to that as a paid release. Partners are also entitled to 2 days unpaid of 6.5 hours if they want to attend scans with you. A lot of companies obviously do more. They do offer more if it's needed, but legally you're entitled to 2 days of 6.5 hours. And keeping in touch days, a lot of people don't know what keeping in touch days are. If you are on maternity leave, you can come into work for up to 10 days before your maternity leave finishes. Where this has been quite good for a lot of women is, particularly at my company, your last 3 months of maternity leave are unpaid. So some people want to come back, but they don't want to come back full time. So they'll come back for like a return to work medical or a meeting to discuss how their return to work is going to be, or a phased return. As long as they don't exceed 10 days, they can come back. They get paid for the days that they come in without it affecting their maternity leave or any maternity pay. If they were on 100% pay for maternity leave, they can ask for those days as overtime. It's like a local agreement with the company, but you're under no obligation to come in. So companies will mostly pay for the keeping in touch days, and it will help bump up your pay while you're on maternity leave. Paternity leave, after a baby is born, you get a week or 2 weeks at either £172.48 or full pay. Adoption leave, as a rep, I've had to step in and represent people on adoption cases a few times. What people don't realise, unfortunately, is if you're adopting and it's not a child that's placed with you by a local authority, you're not entitled to any adoption leave. So we've had instances, unfortunately, where parents of the children have died through illness or accident, and children have gone to live with family members. So in one case I've dealt with, they went to live with the person who was their uncle, and that person wasn't entitled to any leave to help care for those children because it was seen as an adoption within their own family. So unfortunately, that's something where the law really does need to change. but it's just to make people aware. If you do adopt or you foster, or if you do adopt, you are entitled to exactly the same as paternity leave. But you can also pick whichever parent gets it as adoption leave. The principal parent is the one that gets the bulk of the time off and the maternity pay. So it's beneficial for someone who's the higher earner to be the leading parent for that. So parental leave, again, a lot of parents don't realise that they're entitled to unpaid time off. So if you've exhausted your annual leave, you are allowed to take unpaid leave. You're allowed 18 weeks per child up to the 18th birthday of that child, maximum of 4 weeks per year. If you have multiple children and you're fortunately in a job where you can afford to take a bit of time off, if you can't use if you don't have enough leave to cover school holidays, but you feel you need to cover school holidays, you can take this parental leave. Companies can refuse it if subject to business needs. However, you can just keep putting in, and they do usually grant it. It must be taken in whole weeks, and you must have been employed for more than a year and give 21 days notice of start and end dates. However, if at my company, as an example, our annual leave runs January to December. People coming up to Christmas quite often realise that they've not got enough leave left to take time off over Christmas, and unfortunately my employer will make you come in on Christmas Day if you don't have any leave left. It'll make you come in on Boxing Day if you don't have any leave left. Even if there's no work for you to do, it's kind of a point of principle for them. So if you can afford to take a week off, it is an option rather than miss out spending time with your children when they're young. Carers leave is a new leave that has come in this month. You're entitled to 1 week leave every 12 months, and most companies will allow you to take it as half days. It doesn't need to be a family member, just someone who can be classed as a dependent, someone who can be seen to need your care. So it can apply to anyone who's got an illness or an injury that's expected to last more than 3 months, has care needs because of their age, or has a disability. Examples that were given on government websites were you could actually take half a day's leave if you've got a disabled or elderly neighbour that doesn't have their proper care and support, or like they need some sort of respite care or someone to cook meals for them on a particular day. You can take half day unpaid leave here and there. Where it would have been helpful for me previously, my mum had cancer and had to have 6 days chemo radiotherapy, so 6 days a week for 6 weeks. It was a lot of time off to take. So between us all juggling, if we'd all taken half days here and there unpaid, it would have worked out more affordable for us all than having to pay for patient transport, which we did some of the time, because taking a full day or taking annual leave mounts up after a length of time. If you're only entitled to statutory sick pay as well, sometimes it's better to take half a day and have them adjust your shifts if they can. With a disability as well, what not a lot of people realise is that under the Equality Act 2010, cancer is classed as a disability from the point of diagnosis, even if someone is in remission. So if you or a loved one has had a cancer diagnosis, they're protected by the Equality Act for the rest of their life. No one is completely sure the effects of chemotherapy, radiotherapy or cancer on the body, what it does with regards to fatigue, various operations, anything like that. So there is a blanket. If someone has had cancer, they are classed as disabled. Because of that, the law protects them over things like asking for reasonable adjustments at work and people taking time off to care for them and take them to doctor's appointments and such like. I'll talk about reasonable adjustments a bit further along. People can also have time off. So the provision for domestic emergencies introduced by the Maternity and Parental Leave Regulations 1999 under the Employee Relations Act 1999, and spouse, partner, child, person who lives in the same house, anyone who reasonably relies on you for help. If there is an emergency, if they are sick, if you're needed to care for them, then the companies have to grant you emergency time off. We have a domestic leave policy at our company. I'm not sure whether everyone does. So if you have a catastrophe at home, such as a fire, flood, burglary, you get, last minute day off. What a lot of people will do is phone up sick, not realizing that there is domestic leave in place for them to do it. And obviously, if you go off sick too often, you run the risk of managing for attendance schemes. So this is just something for people to be aware of. Reservists, if anyone's interested in being in the TA, a lot of people say, oh, I don't have time, it doesn't fit in with shift work. There is a legal obligation for companies to allow you to attend TA, reservist, anything like that. They have to, if you have to go on camp, they have to adjust you. You can get additional paid leave for 2 weeks to attend camp. It's quite beneficial. A lot of people don't realise that you can get paid quite a lot if you're in the TA. So particularly for cadets or people with part-time jobs or lower paid jobs, you can become a reservist and earn some extra money, and your main job has to facilitate that for you. There is also the Armed Forces Covenant, which companies are signing up for. Military personnel and families are not allowed to be discriminated under that. Where that has helped where I work is, although I live in Cornwall, my depot is Plymouth. We have a naval base and a dockyard nearby. Lots of people who work on the railway where I work have children who've joined the Navy. If they suddenly get deployed or they have a passing out parade or anything, as a parent and a family member of someone who is in the armed forces, you get priority to have leave to last minute if needed to attend events like that, because otherwise it's seen as discriminating against a military family. Civic leave. This is the thing that I originally put the presentation together for. People who want to get involved in local politics and get involved in their community don't realise that most companies have things in place, and legally you are entitled to have some time off to attend civic duties. So if you're a local councillor, member of a police authority, member of statutory tribunals, governing body of educational establishments, so again that's where your school governor leave comes in, member of prison monitoring boards, mayors or members of local authorities, companies have to give you release. They don't always pay, but if you're fortunate to be in a job where, again, you can take a day's unpaid release here and there, or they're happy to move your shifts, and then there's nothing to stop you getting a bit more involved. And I'll talk a bit more about what is involved in some of these roles as we go through. Magistrates as well. Anyone can be a magistrate. It's definitely something worth looking into. You get, the minimum entitlement is 13 full days or 26 half days. Companies have to release you to do that, and you get paid. If your company doesn't pay you, then you are entitled to the allowances that are there. So if you're self-employed, for 4 hours as a magistrate, you'll get £67.48. And if you are employed by someone, you will get released to attend those things. They give you your roster well in advance, so companies have no excuse not to release you. And I spent time when I was younger doing journalism qualifications, and I spent a lot of time doing court reporting. We definitely need a good mix of people to be magistrates, so that it's not all middle-class Tory wannabes that have some sort of power over, or feel like they have some sort of power or some unconscious bias there. There just needs to be a good mix of anyone from the community to step forward and be magistrates. So it is paid, you do get guaranteed release, it is worth looking at. Obviously jury service is paid. If you get called to court, it's either unpaid or paid, depending on why. And extended leave and sabbaticals I've already touched on. Sorry if I'm rushing through, but I don't want to keep you here all night. So reasonable adjustments. I talked about if someone is disabled, so if you have cancer, you're classed as disabled. You're entitled, if you're classed as disabled, to ask for a reasonable adjustment in your workplace, and it's not the same as flexible working. If you need a reasonable adjustment because you're disabled, then the company are more likely to have to grant it. And it's things like shorter shifts, fixed hours, changing the work types. We've had reasonable adjustments where I work put in place for people with disabilities, particularly fatigue, having to take particular types of medication, diabetes and wanting a more regular shift pattern to help manage their diabetes, menopause. We have lots of temporary reasonable adjustments put in place for women who are going through the menopause, where they might be struggling with a particular time of day shift wise, or want to either start earlier, start later. Companies have a legal obligation to look at that if there is something medical or disabled. The good thing with reasonable adjustments, where it's different from flexible working, if you apply for flexible working, which is basically applying to have your contracted hours or your hours of work changed at work, it's a permanent contract change. If you wanted a reasonable adjustment, so say you wanted to, maybe instead of working a 4-day week, you wanted to work a 5-day week but work shorter hours because of fatigue, because you were struggling, then if in 2-3 years time or even shorter you felt it wasn't working, or you felt well enough to go back on your original shift pattern, then they would be able to do that, whereas flexible working is a permanent contract change. So reasonable adjustments and temporary reasonable adjustments are short term and more likely to be granted. Flexible working laws have changed recently, so you can, it used to be you could only apply for flexible working once every 12 months. It's now twice every 12 months, and the companies only have to give you 2 months notice of their decision. So again, if you wanted to change your hours at work, it's definitely worth looking more at flexible working. There are some other types of leave that are locally agreed in particular companies. Some companies give a day off if you're a blood donor, some give moving days, some give a day off for marriage. Again, these are all things that are worth looking at, because some people just, they get to the end of the year and they haven't got leave left. One thing that we have on Great Western and other companies are slowly bringing in is domestic abuse leave. So this is additional to sick leave or annual leave. What is recognised that if someone's in an abusive relationship, they need time off to perhaps speak to the police, to speak to social services, to speak to doctors, to potentially find somewhere else to live. There's lots of things, and quite often for people in domestic abuse relationships, they struggle to do this if they are at home. So they can, if with the domestic abuse leave, they can be seen to be going to work, but with agreement with an individual manager that they will have that time off, they can then use that time to do all the things they need to do. Previously, what had happened is people were using up their annual leave, or they were going sick, and then it would leave them at risk of losing their job if they were off sick, or if they were on statutory sick pay, they could be in financial deficit. So GWR have a policy in place where all managers can grant up to 10 days leave without question, and it gets written in the notes just as a locally agreed leave as per policy. And there's a few different things it could be, and that's how it's been introduced. It's actually worked really well. I know of 2 cases now where people have really been struggling at work. One was a victim of stalking, one was a victim of domestic violence, and they were able to use that time to relocate, to give statements to the police, all without their partners knowing, and they were able to flee the situations they were in. For companies, it's a really good buy-in. So if you're a union rep, it's definitely something to take forward to your companies, because the chances of it being used on a regular basis is really small. So in the couple of years, we have thousands of employees at Great Western. I know of it being used twice. So it's more supportive for the staff than them having to go sick, and it's just good for the companies, really, because they can say they've got it in, it looks good for them, and it does really help people, and it can potentially save lives. A lot of the discussion around this came from the Vodafone Foundation. They had a member of staff who people knew that she was a victim of abuse at home, but they didn't know what they could do, and then she was killed by her partner. If something like this had been in place previously, she would have potentially had the opportunity to put something in place during work hours and be absent from work, and it could have potentially saved her life.